The positives and negatives of of Trump's tariffs. Well, we have gone over that a couple times already, but you know the so let's see here. We actually have the board. This is panel 1. So the positives is that at least right now it's finally done. Like since the very start, we've only been taught, like he's just told us like we will tariff everybody, right? And but until Liberation Day, Wednesday, April 2nd, it was always like, okay, well, what does that even mean, dude? So uh the positive is that it's out. The negative is that it's out. And it's on everything. It's 10% on pretty much everybody, and then these numbers are basically made up. Um, they figured out that it was actually the so generally tariffs are like an actual tax, and they're giving Afghanistan and Russia a break, which like basically like people that we have considered been considered terrorists for like the last 60 years are not on this list. um but it, I don't know, it's tough because ultimately what this is that it's a tax, right? So so this claims that China has a 67% tax on all the US goods going into China. In reality, when we look at it, what it really is just their deficit with us divided by their imports, and it makes a percentage. So like they just did that with all of our biggest trade, with all of our trade partners basically. And if you didn't hit a percentage, they just gave you 10. So it's like the original definition of it wasn't that good. The long term, the concept of it, right? The idea is that if you if you charge everybody money to ship their products in, and this is more targeted at US companies, because right now all pretty much all US companies have their stuff imported in. Like an Apple iPhone gets made in at Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing in Taiwan, and then they ship the phone to Apple, and then Apple sells it. So Apple pays, let's see, Taiwan 64%. So now Apple is paying 32% more per phone. And because in order to offset these costs of these tariffs, Taiwan Semiconductors charges Apple 32% more to recoup the cost at the border, right? Technically, that 32% is getting paid by Apple, but that is just going directly to the government. In theory, the government collects enough tariff taxes that their goal is to lower income tax. So despite everybody paying, 30% more for their iPhone and more for groceries and everything else, in theory, you don't pay any income tax. Does that work? Not well. So, and that's why we've lost so much money in the stock market right now. Is that pretty much all these ideas are really everywhere you look, it's just another bad idea. And then the other part is that China just announced today that they are going to do retaliatory tariffs. So, if I can find it, yeah. So, whether or not China was giving us the 67% or 69% tariffs that Trump was saying, they are officially hitting us with 34% tariffs back at all of our goods. And there's speculation now that every single country that we've hit with a tariff is going to hit us with a tariff, right? So, my speculation when we first talked about this was that in theory, you could argue it's a 4D chess move on the Trump side of things, because if everybody comes out and matches his tariffs, basically he's basically made up tariff numbers that every single country has charged us, right? But then all these countries come back and match those tariffs. So basically Trump made up the tariffs and then everybody is just following suit with him. Next month, he could come out and say we're going to continue our 50% like match. So China just matched us with 34%. Next month, Trump could come out and say, well, now we're going to do 50% again. So now it's 17%. If China matches that 17% right after he does it, then the next month he can come out. So, like by June, Trump would say, all right, well, now we're at our baseline 10. And if you do that with every single country, it's basically just a really long winded, weird way to put a 10% tariff on every single country in the world. Is this a good idea? Maybe. Ultimately, the goal is to make it so that production comes back to America. So let's see. TSM has already been building fabrication plants in America. So back in 2020, we had a lot of worry that, like, we're way too reliant on China for making our chips. So even back in 2020, we made the CHIPS Act so that we could actually have this stuff. So TSM has been building plants here, but Trump is doubling down on this to like really get all of our manufacturing back here. And in theory, it's a good idea. It's just that you could have incentivized all these companies to build these plants without imposing all these tariffs and making such, like such a sour taste in everybody in the whole entire world's mouth for no reason, almost. It's just a strange way to go about basically bringing production back to America. Especially when you think about like the plan being that we're going to use these to get rid of income tax. So because like when you pay taxes on all this stuff, apparently it offsets enough to do income tax. But then in the long term, if you think about if all of this works correctly, the weird part about it is that so short term, you go and say, all right, we are going to just tax everything that comes into the country and that'll offset our income tax. So you remove income tax because you're making so much money off of these tariffs of all the goods coming into your country. In just the perfect scenario where everything works. But because you're making so much money on all this stuff, all of these manufacturers build their plants and all of their stuff in America. Well, now that you've built everything in America, you now don't have any imports to tariff anymore. When you don't have any more imports to tariff, you're not collecting any taxes that way. And then you've also removed the federal income tax. So then the federal government doesn't have any way of funding. So if all of this goes perfectly according to plan, the federal government goes broke. I mean, the I hope that's sarcastic because we all know that none of the corporations are paying any, like me and you paid more taxes on the money that we made than Jeff Bezos and Amazon combined the last 5 years. Like the unless you dramatically restructure the income tax, like how you tax corporate entities, that won't matter because they already don't have a corporate income tax, and the whole goal of having these tariffs is to remove income taxes. So if everything goes according to plan, the federal government will basically be bankrupt by the end of all of it. So yeah, I of all the people to know all the loopholes and tax shelters, Donald Trump would know them. Would he close them? I don't know. This is also the guy that just rug pulled his own company. So an hour before Trump announced an hour before Trump announced that he was going to tariff the entire world, he also had to file with the SEC because he's going to sell his entire 50% stake in JD in his True Social company. So, yeah. So the same guy who's theoretically talking about closing loopholes and tax shelters is the person who makes his companies, his publicly traded companies, using loopholes and tax shelters while at the same time selling meme coins and rug pulling them. So, I don't know. I'm just saying that if everything goes perfectly according to plan, based off of what he's talking about, the federal government goes completely broke. So, I don't think it's going to go according to plan. So far, it hasn't, unless he wanted the stock market to lose $7 trillion the moment he said something about it, about tariffs. So this Truth Social, by the way, is what he just filed to sell all of his shares of. This. Oh, there. Okay, my bad.
Market by 20% this month, but he's doing it on purpose. And this is why Warren Buffett just said Trump is making the best economic moves he's seen in over 50 years. Now here's the secret game he's playing, and it could make you rich. So why is he doing this? To push cash into treasuries, which forces the Fed to slash interest rates in May, and those lower rates give the Fed the ability to refinance trillions of debt very inexpensively. It also weakens the dollar and drops mortgage rates. Now it's a wild chess move, but it's working. Now you're probably wondering, what about his tariffs? Well, I'll tell you, it's a genius play. It actually forces companies to build here to dodge them. It also forces farmers to sell more of their products here in the U.S. to bring grocery prices way down. We've already seen this with eggs. Now remember, 94% of all stocks are owned only by 8% of Americans. So Trump, he's taking from the rich short term and handing it to the middle class through lower prices.
Kinda. I mean, you could cope on this quite a bit.
Doing it on purpose. And this is why Warren Buffett just said Trump is making the best.
I want to see if that's true. Yeah. Of course, Buffett wouldn't say that. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of backwards ass cope that everybody wants to go through, and of course he's going to retweet something that, like, you literally bend over backwards to make sense of why you do something so irrational. But I mean, the guy brings a lot of really good, like, almost good points. They're just not entirely true. Overall, it's better to have less barriers across the board than less barriers around the world is better than more barriers around the world. I don't like, and historically that's always been true. So, as far as the interest rates being cut, that's not a thing. Jay Powell literally came on today and said the exact opposite. So every time there's high tariff, he raises the interest rate. So if Donald Trump's goal was to lower interest rates by doing tariffs, then he's accomplished the exact opposite, because Jerome Powell will raise interest rates, and then all mortgages get more expensive and loans get more expensive when that happens. And if Trump had done nothing, he would have got his interest rate cuts. That was the thing, is that we were set to cut interest rates this year. But now we're looking like we don't want to cut interest rates anymore because the guy who prints our money is not sure about what's going to happen. There's a high uncertainty going on. And every time we have higher inflation, and you have to raise interest rates to offset that inflation. So that's wrong. the point of like he's incentivizing farmers to sell their food to us, making groceries cheaper, is like it's a disingenuous point, because the reason that farmers will be incentivized to sell to us domestically instead of foreign governments is that you're relying on you're relying on other countries to make it so that you are, or like you're relying on other countries to match your tariffs, right? China buys most of our wheat, China buys most of our soybeans. So you're relying on China to match your tariffs. If they don't match their tariffs, farmers won't sell any less to them. So it's an unintended consequence of that. So it's rough. There's really only, until we really see what happens, it's a lot of uncertainty. Nothing like this has been tried for a while. The underlying ideas is like a maybe, and like I said, that like the retweet from Trump is definitely a really hard cope. The guy definitely got a lot of likes and a lot of views for saying that, but especially when you're retweeted by the president, like he definitely got all of his social engineering points for making that video, and like definitely like gobbling on it. But was any of it true? Meh, not really. He used a lot of really big economic words, but the one person that he quoted was a complete lie. So